Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this morning for the webinar this morning titled Advanced Geothermal in California, Clean, Reliable Energy for All. My name is Woody Hastings. I'm the Phase Out Polluting Fuels Program Director for the Climate Center. I'll be the webinar moderator today. In my program, we talk a lot about phasing out fossil and other polluting fuels, but today we'll be talking about one of the things we can phase in to replace those fuels. I chose this image, cross-section of the Earth, to remind us of the enormous heat resource beneath our feet that will be around for literally billions of years to come, a key resource that we can phase in. We're honored this morning to have Assemblymember Diane Papin, representative for Assembly District 21, which covers the entire eastern Bayside part of the peninsula in San Mateo County, from Brisbane in the north to East Palo Alto in the south. She's the author and co-author of the bill package this year aimed at advancing geothermal energy in California. Two of those bills will be in committee tomorrow. An assembly floor session was scheduled at 10 a.m. this morning after we had scheduled this webinar, so I will interrupt my opening presentation so that Assemblymember Papin can share her thoughts with us and head to the Assembly chamber. We're also joined this morning by Neil Atier of Ever Technologies, one of the leading firms demonstrating and deploying closed-loop geothermal energy systems. Following Neil will be Claudia Sissamfu, Public Affairs and Advocacy Manager for Sonoma Clean Power, California's second community choice agency that launched in 2014. Claudia will tell us about the GeoZone project, serving as an innovation testbed for NextGen geothermal technologies. And last but not least, Chris Snyder, Political Director for the International Union of Operating Engineers Local 3, will share with us the reasons why skilled workers are interested in the new developments in the geothermal industry. So this is just a couple more brief remarks before we invite Assemblymember Papin to speak. This is a photo collage of the Climate Center board and staff, founded in Sonoma County in 2001. The Climate Center is a small but mighty think tank do tank with a mission to rapidly reduce climate pollution at scale starting in California. I want to acknowledge at this time my fellow staff members, Pamela Martinez, Stacy Mines, and Mark Victoria, who are supporting the webinar behind the scenes to help make things run smoothly. Big thanks to our sponsors, our generous sponsors, Bay Area Air District, Peninsula Clean Energy, MCE, River City Bank, and Sunrun, and also to our promotional partners, Actera, Bay Area Act Now, Clean Coalition, Civic Well, Climate Resolve, Community Environmental Council, and Grid Alternatives. So without any further ado, I'd like to invite Assemblymember Papin to join us if she is here. And there she is. Yes, very good. Assemblymember Papin, please share with us your perspective from the policy from the state, and tell us about the bills that you've introduced, and if you can touch on AB 526, one of your bills that didn't make it through this year, but I think it was a really good bill. So hopefully you can touch on that one. Thanks so much for being here.
Well, good morning, Woody. I'm just delighted to be here with you this morning to talk about a subject that is near and dear to me. So I think I would like to start just by saying that, California really is the nation's geothermal powerhouse. I apologize for my voice. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, and I feel like we really have just barely scratched the surface, if you'll excuse the pun, as it relates to geothermal. Geothermal accounts for only about 5% of California's in-state generation, and that's despite us being the largest generator of geothermal power in the United States. So we've got a ways to go, and we haven't harnessed it quite like we should. So the geysers, which are a crown jewel of geothermal in up near Sonoma area, they span both Sonoma and Lake County. They remain the world's largest geothermal field. And when I go other places, I say that with such pride. I'm just like, I feel very blessed that we have this resource in our state. And they supply massive amounts of continuous zero carbon electricity. And the beautiful part about it is what? That doesn't need wind, it doesn't need the sun every hour, every day, which I think really sets it apart from the intermittent sources of power like solar and wind. So Sonoma Clean Power's GeoZone initiative, I think, really exemplifies the potential that lies ahead for us. Partnering with Sonoma and Mendocino counties to deliver up to 600 megawatts of next generation geothermal energy, balancing our grid and the clock our grid, balancing our grid, around the clock, well into the future. If you haven't been able to ever get up there and see it, if you ever get the opportunity, I strongly recommend it. The U.S. Department of Energy, and while in California we don't talk too much about the feds these days, but they tell us that widespread deployment of next-gen geothermal could cut Western clean energy costs by up to 25%. That's why during my tenure in the state assembly, I've made it my mission to become the self-anointed geothermal queen. That's right. You didn't know you were amongst royalty this morning, but here I am in all my glory. But in that effort, both myself and Assemblymember Rogers, who represents Sonoma County, we have sort of teamed up to introduce several pieces of legislation this year, sort of a geothermal package, if you will, so that California can really catalyze geothermal energy, the exploration of it, and the production of it. So let me tell you a little bit about some of these bills. This year I introduced Assembly Bill 527, which is really to kind of remove some of the regulatory red tape that applies to exploratory wells. Right now, folks that want to start new exploratory wells, they kind of have to go through two processes, and they're kind of duplicative, both CEQA and NEPA at the federal level. So what this bill says is, look, if you meet the feds, you can really streamline then the exploration and the requirements of CEQA, because we really don't feel that there should be a duplicative process. And I think that the streamlining really is critical to enable up to about 30 gigawatts of next generation geothermal capacity by mid-century, which is more than double any other state's current capacity. So the bill is moving along. We did take some amendments whereby the Senate wanted to have us enact perhaps our own set of guidelines ultimately for exploratory wells, but they're willing at this point to allow us the streamlining if you're going through the federal process, which is onerous in and of itself as it relates to exploratory wells. So AB 527 also works hand in hand with the bill I had last year, AB 1359, which said it allowed counties to be the lead agency for CEQA review instead of CalGEM, because unfortunately CalGEM in the last 20 years hasn't done much with issuing permits for exploratory wells. And I really felt, listen, if we can get exploratory wells up and going, we're really going to move ahead with California's clean energy future. So together, these bills kind of created a groundwork for geothermal, both the streamlining if you have to go through NEPA, and then allowing a county to be the reviewing agency. Counties can work a lot faster on these things. And I think that it'll make us geothermal not just being just an occasional player, if you will. I think these bills really set the backbone for a clean energy grid. So then I introduced 526, which is what Woody talked about at the beginning. And that nothing happens in government without a plan. Because once you have a plan, then what happens? You fund that plan. And we have an offshore wind plan, to give you an example, but we don't have a geothermal energy plan. And so I introduced a bill that said, hey, let's get a plan together that would identify ideal locations to expand geothermal, assess environmental and economic impacts, and prioritize public engagement, so that geothermal is recognized really as a foundational energy source and not just some afterthought anymore. But due to budgetary considerations, the bill didn't advance, but I will return when state finances recover, because I really feel you got to have a plan in place. And I ain't going anywhere. Bills may die, but authors don't. So I'll be bringing it back. And I think it makes tremendous strategic consent, tremendous strategic sense to be able to enact a plan. And then the final bill in this package is Assemblymember Rogers' Bill 531. And this legislation addresses a barrier for smaller geothermal projects. Right now, you got to have a project that's 50 megawatts or more in order to qualify for the Energy Commission's streamlined process, permitting process. And but what you find, especially up at the geysers, is that there are multiple plants in the fields that are 10, 20, or 30 megawatts. And because they provide 24/7 power, their contribution really is as impactful as larger intermittent solar or wind installations. So we really feel that that sort of 50% threshold in order to get the permitting streamlined really is too high. It's got to come down. And so AB 531 expands eligibility for this expedited permitting to include these sort of smaller geothermal projects. And by recognizing this sort of unique value of continuous geothermal energy, the bill helps ensure that geothermal can play a vital role in California's clean energy future. So together, these bills really represent what I believe to be sort of a strategic, future-focused approach to harnessing one of California's most reliable and underutilized clean energy resources by streamlining permitting, planning for long-term development, and removing outdated barriers. We're really positioning geothermal to move from the margins to the mainstream. And if we're serious about clean, stable, and affordable energy in the future, I think geothermal really has to be a part of that foundation. So I'm delighted to be here with you today. I'm so thrilled that you're having a webinar on geothermal. Anything we can do to elevate its values, I'm all on board. So thank you so much for having me. I really am honored to be with you to talk about this subject. It's the wave of the future.
Well, thank you so much, Assembly Member. We really appreciate you being here, joining us this morning. And we know you have to get going over to the Assembly chamber there. So I'm sorry you won't be able to stay on for the Q&A later. But folks, I think reach out to Assembly Member Pappin's office anytime. I'm sure she and or her staff are happy to, respond to your questions about the bill package. So thanks very much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
And folks, so let's support Assemblymember Pappin and Assemblymember Rogers' efforts in this bill package. Mark is dropping let me put my slides back up because I am going to share with you a QR code that you can see. There's a QR code that you can scan, and Mark is dropping a link into the chat that brings you to an action page where you can just click through and support Assembly Bill 531 to allow those smaller projects to be able to be permitted through that long-standing California Energy Commission process. And just, folks, I want to just to get to the start here. If it's not already clear, I want to make it clear now that the kind of geothermal we're talking about, because there's a lot of different kinds of geothermal, it's the kind that generates electricity. And within that category, there are several subcategories that we're going to hear about later in the webinar. And you, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Climate Safe California and then hand it off to Neil Atier, our first speaker for the day. The Climate Safe California campaign calls on the state of California to enact the following solutions: commit to 80% below 1990 levels of greenhouse gas emissions and net negative emissions as soon as possible. Secure a just transition for workers, their families, and communities who currently depend on fossil fuel industries. And three, close the loop on the climate gap when enacting climate policies to ensure lower income communities of color are no longer disproportionately harmed by the health and economic consequences of fossil fuel use, and have equitable access to climate-friendly solutions. And lastly, enact a suite of policies required by science to put us on track for net negative emissions as soon as possible. Climate Safe California and all of Climate Center's work is guided by three core principles: following the latest science, prioritizing climate justice, and securing a smooth transition to family-sustaining jobs for workers. There are 4 ingredients in the recipe for a climate-safe California. These initiatives fit together like pieces of a puzzle. We need to pursue all of them in tandem to deliver on the promise of California doing its part for a climate-safe future, and in so doing, providing a model for other states and nations to follow. The pillars are phase out fossil fuels, commensurate with declines in demand for fossil fuels, scale up carbon drawdown, build the grid of the future by transitioning, oops, sorry, I think I got another slide here. Yeah, sorry, the pillars. Phase out fossil fuels, scale up carbon drawdown, build the grid of the future by transitioning to clean, decentralized, affordable energy for all. And last but not least, identify private and public funding resources for these necessary climate solutions. In 2025, California is the 4th largest economy in the world. What we do in California reverberates around the world. California has the tools and the know-how to lead, and when our elected officials accelerate the transition to clean energy, all of us will benefit. Since 1960, California has been a leader in conventional geothermal development, and it should also lead on next-gen geothermal. So, how do advanced geothermal energy systems fit into a climate-safe California initiative? The prospects for next-gen geothermal systems are very promising. But as we go forward, extractive industry mistakes of the past must be avoided by ensuring transparency, meaningful community engagement, and environmental protection. As we will hear from our presenters, these emerging technologies can line up well with our guiding principles of acting on the latest science, ensuring high-quality jobs for skilled workers, and maintaining high standards of justice and equity. Technologies being piloted are low to zero greenhouse gases, scalable, have nearly one-to-one skills transferability from oil and gas workers, can operate 24/7, 365, provide opportunities for community benefits, can abide by environmental justice principles, and are inexhaustible on human timescales. I am now pleased to invite Neil Etier to come on screen. I'll take my screen share off. Neil is the vice president at Ever Technologies. And Neil will provide us with an overview of the next-gen technologies we're talking about. Neil, my research tells me that one of them, closed loop systems, the one you're going to be talking about, are the ultimate in efficiency, resource conservation, and environmental protection in the geothermal world. Am I right about that?
You are right about that,
The
Woody. Yes,
floor is yours.
absolutely. Thank you so much. And I just wanted to reiterate the thanks for the invitation to come here and share my excitement about geothermal with you all on the call, and really exciting to be part of this really star-studded panel with Chris and Claudia and Assemblywoman Pappen here as well. So just wonderful. So I wanted to set the stage, and there may be some of you on the webinar who you hear about geothermal, but you don't know what it is really. And so it comes from the Greek words geo, which is earth, and thermos, which is heat. So the generation of that energy, of that heat, is really twofold. One of them is from the original founding of the earth, the primordial founding of the earth. That center of the earth, the core of the earth, is over 6,000 degrees Celsius, which is hotter than the surface of the sun. So that energy is continually permeating out from the core to the surface. The other side of that heat generation is the radioactive decay. And there's some debate theoretically about how much is coming from what, but it's about half of that is coming from potassium, thorium, uranium, and the half-life of that, little nuclear reactions that are creating energy in the subsurface and creating more heat. And people have used geothermal energy for thousands of years. It's been used for mineral springs, for bathing, for cooking, medicinal purposes. And as Assembly Member Pappen talked about, California is leading the way, not only within the US, but globally for electricity generation. Now, that being said, it still makes up a really small percentage of the global renewable resource. So from an installed capacity worldwide, geothermal is about 16 or 17 gigawatts, and which is about 0.2% of the installed capacity. In the US, it's about 0.4%, and about 5% of California's energy mix. So again, they're the leaders in this. And there's only 5 countries in the world that have over a gigawatt of installed capacity. If you look at the bottom right-hand graph, it shows renewable energy sources over the last 60 or 70 years, and you can see what wind and solar have done in the last 20 years. They have this hockey stick. They've seen a massive increase of installed capacity, and geothermal has not seen this yet. We've seen, if you were to look at this, we would still be on the x-axis. So that is what we're trying to change with this next generation geothermal technologies that we're all working on. And so when you listen and you think, what is geothermal and what are the different technologies, there's really 3 buckets. One of them is traditional geothermal, which you may also hear as hydrothermal resources. So that is what the geysers is. That's what the Salton Sea is. That is using existing subsurface aquifers and brines to be able to bring up that energy to the surface. It's an open system, so it relies on convective flow of fluids through the subsurface. Another portion that you may have heard of for NextGen is EGS, which is Enhanced or Engineered Geothermal Systems. So this group of companies who are working on this and advancing this in a tremendous way are looking at creating a subsurface radiator or subsurface reservoir to be able to transfer the fluid that goes down, go through, absorb the energy in the subsurface and bring it up the outlet well. And so that is a man-made reservoir that they're trying to utilize that subsurface heat that's below them. The other side of this fence is a closed loop system. So this doesn't have interaction with the subsurface reservoir in a convective manner, but more in a conductive manner. So you're putting something you're putting a fluid into the system, and in our case, it's 99.5% water, and then you're flowing that down and you're absorbing the energy from the subsurface and then bringing it up to the surface. So it can be really small, like a ground source heat pump, which is the GSHP there, which is very shallow, utilized wonderfully for very small applications. And then you get into bigger pipe and pipe solutions. And then you get into our solution, which is a large radiator. So a big underground heat exchanger, which we drill. And with that geometry, we're able to have a large conductive area in the subsurface to absorb the energy and bring that up to the surface. So our Everlight was our first demonstration project, which we drilled in central Alberta in 2019. Our Everloop 1.0, which is the one that's drilled down 4.5 kilometers and then drilled out 3.5 kilometers. We're currently drilling that right now in southern Germany. And then Everloop orientation, which you're seeing there, is drilling down to the basement and getting deeper. So the deeper you get, the hotter you get. And so we're continuing to work on applications to be able to drill deeper and be able to harness some of that energy that's even deeper. There's a wonderful video. It's an 11-minute long video that kind of goes through all of geothermal. I won't be able to go into that here, but there's a link, and I think we'll drop it into the chat as well. So it's really a wonderful video that helps explain geothermal to people who may not know what geothermal is. So how do we differentiate ourselves? Now, I'm a huge proponent of all types of geothermal. It's just a wonderful resource that we need to be able to utilize more. And both traditional EGS and Everloop have these characteristics of producing firm power, which Assembly Member Papin talked about. Capable of producing direct heat, cooling, or power applications. It has a low surface footprint. It's a clean energy source. It uses low material intensity. Now, where we differentiate ourselves is because we're just drilling this big subsurface radiator, we do not need a permeable aquifer. So that means it's scalable. We can go anywhere. Because it's a closed geometry, our system runs on a natural thermal siphon. It doesn't need any extra out energy to be able to move those fluids around. We don't utilize fracking. There's no fracking-induced seismicity. We have very small or negligible continuous water use, which is really critically important. It was one of the top criteria for Sonoma Clean Power's GeoZone, which Claudia is going to talk about here shortly. Water use was one of those. Highly predictable because we know the geometry. I can tell you what the output of our system is going to be in year 38 and year 62, and then capable of lossless load following, which I'll talk to shortly. This graph attempts to show 2 things. One is the emissions intensity and the other is the material intensity for an Everloop. The first one is emissions intensity. So what does it take to build these things? So if you look at a full life cycle of an Everloop, what it takes is you need steel for the casing. You need to fabricate that. You need the cement to be able to isolate the well bore that you're drilling. You need the energy to be able to drill the wells and the Everloop in itself. You need the men and women who drive their vehicles there, the abandonment at the end of it. And so overall, if you look at the full Scope 3 emissions for emissions intensity, an Everloop is about 10 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per megawatt hour, which is about on par with onshore and offshore wind, about 4 or 5 times better than solar PV or biomass, and an order of magnitude better than fossil fuels. The other side of this is material intensity. What does it take to build one of these things? Well, for us, we just need steel and cement. And so we do not rely on cadmium, gallium, tellurium, these rare earth elements, the ones that are often not found in North America. So we are in the sweet spot of this where we are both a low material intensity and a low emissions intensity. Footprint is critically important. I'm not going to go into this much other than saying that we're 35 times more dense than solar, 300 times more dense than wind. And that's because all of that energy is utilized in the subsurface, that big underground heat exchanger. So it's got a very, very small surface footprint. Dispatchability. Assemblymember Pappen talked about this a little bit. She talked about the ability for us to be clean, firm all the time. And I think that baseload is actually not the holy grail of energy. The holy grail of energy is to be able to dispatch that. And so with an Everloop, you can run it at, in this example, 10 megawatts per hour for every hour of the day. But in California, where you have a high solar penetration, you're not wanting to do that. You may want to curtail those hours in the middle of the day and move those out. And so if you look at this, you have 240 megawatt hours to dispatch in a 24-hour period. I can move that to the shoulders of the duck curve, the higher fossil intensity, the higher price point, and I can actually have more value for that energy that you're bringing up from the subsurface because I can push it out and I can curtail that. You can't do that with nuclear. That needs to continue on. So that actually exacerbates the duck curve because you can't shut it off. But with this one, you can slide it out and you're able to dispatch it in a certain manner. So when we talk about this, community engagement, jobs, benefits to local counties, these are built with American personnel. These are high-paying domestic jobs. Chris is going to talk about some of the union pieces. We think it's so important. A construction of an Everloop creates up to 100 direct jobs, 300 indirect jobs. You can harden your grid. Woody talked about the dispatchable or the distributed nature of this. This is one that you can do that. If you have 200 megawatts in an area, you can go and build an Everloop there because the resource is there. So you can move that around. So that adds resiliency and hardening the grid. I talked about the low GHG emitting power source, water use, taxes that are now coming into these local jurisdictions, and the opportunity to move to energy autonomy in an affordable manner. California is a net importer of energy, fossil fuels, and electricity. That doesn't need to be the case. California can be a leader in this. And so that brings me to my final slide, which talks about, originally they asked me, what are the prospects and the challenges of doing geothermal in California? Well, the prospects are enormous. We talked about this, Woody talked about this already. It's the fourth largest economy in the world if it was a country. Senate Bill 100, SB 100, has goals of achieving 100% clean and zero carbon electricity by 2045. There are renewable portfolio standards that are administered by the California Public Utility Commission. There's already a procurement mandate in place for clean, firm resources of a gigawatt, which for the LSEs, which is geothermal. And California already is a leader in this space. They have 5% of their electricity coming from generation from geothermal. What are the challenges? Assembly Member Pappen is facing them head on. Lengthy, fragmented permitting processes. These assembly bills are looking to streamline this to be able to move these things forward. And first of a kind projects are expensive. So there's a high capital outlay. We are continuing to come down this learning curve, and others are doing that as well. So a really exciting time for us to be moving forward with next generation geothermal in California. So with that, I am finished and I will pass it back to Woody.
Well, thank you so much, Neil. Fantastic. And folks, do watch that video. It's a really good video. It's only 11 minutes, so that link is in the is in the chat, and it will be shared with the webinar material, with the webinar recording. Also, I neglected to mention earlier about questions and answers. We're going to stay off mic for the attendees today. We invite you to post your questions, questions and comments in the chat or the Q&A, and we will reserve some time at the end of all of the presenters at the end of the webinar for try to get to some of your questions. We never get to all of them. I'll be honest about that, but you can always follow up with us. So now I would like to invite Claudia Sisson-Fu to come on camera. She's the Public Affairs and Advocacy Manager for Sonoma Clean Power. Claudia, please tell us about Sonoma Clean Power's Innovation Testbed GeoZone project. Take it away.
Great, thanks so much, Woody. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so there we go. Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to be here, and thanks so much to the Climate Center for inviting me to be part of this today. My name is Claudia Sisson-Fu. I'm with Sonoma Clean Power, and today I'll be sharing an overview of our Geothermal Opportunity Zone, or GeoZone initiative, which aims to bring next generation geothermal power to California at a meaningful scale and create a model for local communities to play a more active role in the resource development process. So for those of you who may not be familiar, Sonoma Clean Power is the local public power provider for Sonoma and Mendocino counties in Northern California. We are part of the Community Choice Aggregator, or CCA family, and our main purpose is to provide electricity generated by cleaner and more renewable energy sources while still staying cost competitive to the investor and utility, which in our service area is PG&E. Because we are not for profit, we're also able to reinvest a lot more of the money that our customers spend on electricity bills each month back into the community through things like customer offerings, supporting the work of local organizations, and supporting the development of more local renewable resources. Our most ambitious effort yet is the GeoZone. Our goal is to build up to 600 megawatts of advanced geothermal power in Sonoma and Mendocino counties over the next decade. And geothermal is unique in its ability to provide clean energy 24/7, and that around-the-clock production makes it an extremely valuable resource when it comes to reducing our reliance on natural gas and actually achieving California's commitment to 100% renewable and zero carbon electricity by 2045. The challenge that we set out to solve as a local provider is one that's shared by the entire state, and that is the need for more clean baseload power and that flexibility that Neil mentioned. We've done a great job of building out solar, wind, and batteries, and it's because of those resources that most of the time our grid is powered by renewable and carbon-free sources, but there are times of the day and times of the year that are a lot harder to supply for. So when it's the middle of the winter and solar isn't generating as much power, or we experience a major heat wave and batteries are depleted, Sonoma Clean Power and other power providers across the state still rely heavily on natural gas plants to meet demand, which we know has major health, climate, and financial costs. I think all of us can agree that our electricity bills are already higher than we'd like them to be. Meanwhile, the demand for electricity is only increasing with things like electric vehicles, data centers, and electrification. So we need to get really serious about how to meet that demand with energy that is clean, reliable, and affordable. So when our team started looking ahead and accounting for the growing demand for electricity, we evaluated the feasibility of several different resources and identified next generation geothermal as the most promising solution out there. In 2022, we put out a call to developers to see if there was interest in public-private partnerships, and we wanted to see who could deliver geothermal projects that use less land, require minimal water, can be scaled up in other areas across the state, and most importantly, we're willing to abide by our local community's values. In this first round, our board selected 3 development partners for us to work with. But through this process, we also uncovered significant legislative and regulatory barriers that are preventing projects from moving forward in California. And that really forced us to pivot our original timelines and expectations for our partners. However, we've still been able to build momentum and maintain progress around the GeoZone by partnering with policymakers, academia, the geothermal industry, and labor, including everyone on this panel. So thank you all for gifting your expertise to this effort. We very quickly came to the conclusion that unless we fix these barriers, geothermal projects are going to be built in other states. And that's despite California having the best geology, the best workforce, especially our oil and gas workers whose skills can be easily transferred over to geothermal, and despite having the overwhelming demand for baseload resources. So what we're seeing is developers building in states like Utah and Nevada to sell to the California energy market. And that means our ratepayer dollars are going out of state and will go towards building the hundreds of miles of transmission lines that will be needed to bring that power here. And that also means that our communities are not getting any of the tax revenue or jobs associated with these projects. From a local standpoint, we are incredibly interested in the benefits that developing more geothermal power locally could bring to our region. Some of those include lowering costs for our customers by locking in long-term energy contracts and better insulating us from the volatility of the energy market. The good paying jobs that come from drilling the wells to constructing the facilities to operating the eventual power plants. These are all skilled jobs that would allow the kids that grow up here to build careers in the trades or geothermal industry. And lastly, we want to be a leader and help incubate some of these technologies that will enable us and the state to provide electricity that is 100% renewable, day or night, rain or shine. If we don't act on this opportunity, these benefits and the projects themselves will go to other states, and California will be left behind in an industry that we helped pioneer. Of course, none of this work will matter unless we have the support of our communities. We know that the success of the GeoZone depends on trust and transparency, and that's why we've been engaging early and often with community groups, local agencies, labor organizations, and environmental advocates to inform them of our GeoZone and invite them to stay involved. Over the last year, we've also prioritized our efforts to deepen engagement with tribes and native serving organizations in our service area. Though our GeoZone is a major initiative, we want to make sure that the GeoZone is not the first conversation our agency has with the local tribe. Building meaningful and long-lasting relationships with the tribes in our region is essential to ensuring that Native voices and perspectives are included throughout the GeoZone community engagement process. And that includes community events that Sonoma Clean Power puts on, events developers may organize, and the public review process that comes with permitting and developing any future geothermal projects. We're still in the early stages of engagement, but the feedback so far has been pretty encouraging. People agree that electricity is too expensive and they want their power to be more reliable and affordable. But they also raise important concerns around seismic safety, land and water use, construction impacts on nearby communities, and how to actually hold private partners accountable. And these are all fair questions. Part of the challenge is acknowledging that we don't have the answer to all of them right now, but building the trust and the foundation so that when the time comes to get answers, folks are still engaged and ready to have those conversations. Which leads me to my next slide, the value of local leadership and having a public power provider involved. So our role is to really facilitate and ensure the community's engagement in this conversation, both in the context of the GeoZone, but also it's part of our mission as a CCA to help our local communities mitigate the impacts of climate change and have more control over the energy sources we use. So instead of ending up in this position where we feel like renewable energy projects are happening to us, why not flip that so that our community is empowered and proactively determining what kind of local energy future we want. By leading this geothermal effort locally, we can start to really articulate what our community values are, what our hopes and expectations are, and what trade-offs we are and aren't willing to accept. In addition to ensuring more opportunities and avenues for input beyond what CEQA and other review processes mandate, this model also enables more public oversight and accountability from local decision makers. Our board of directors is made up of elected officials from each of the cities and counties we serve, and all of our monthly board meetings are public, so the community can really participate and access information in a way that's pretty unique and due to the fact that we are a local public agency. In addition to the importance of community support, we also need leadership from the state. Policymakers and state agencies play a critical role in whether these projects succeed. And huge shout out to Assemblymember Pappen and her team for really championing geothermal legislation in Sacramento. And she did a great job describing the intention of each bill, so I won't dive into them again. Unfortunately, AB 526 was held on the suspense file in the Assembly Appropriations Committee, but we'll find out the fate of both AB 527 and AB 531 tomorrow in the Senate Appropriations Committee suspense hearing. Last slide, on the regulatory side, we're advocating at the California Public Utilities Commission to plan ahead for future transmission needs. We're working with the California Energy Commission to ensure geothermal is front and center in SB 100 planning. And we're pursuing public funding opportunities to help de-risk early exploration, because cost is often one of the biggest barriers to making these projects happen. We'd love to see something similar to the Department of Energy's Utah Forge project happen here in California. So just to wrap up, our state has an incredible opportunity to address affordability, achieve its clean energy goals, and create thousands of well-paid jobs by harnessing the value of geothermal. And on a local level, this is a chance for our communities to more actively guide renewable energy projects and hold developers accountable and ensure the benefits associated with these projects stay local.
Well, thank you so much, Claudia. Appreciate that. Exciting project and lots of good questions coming in. Keep them coming in. We'll try to get to them when we get to the Q&A. I'd like to now invite Chris Snyder of the International Union of Operating Engineers Local 3 to come on screen. There you are, Chris. Thanks for being here. Please tell us about how your union and maybe other unions view advanced geothermal energy. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Woody, and thanks for having me here today at the Climate Center. Maybe a little bit, I'll start a little bit about me. So I'm the political director of the Operating Engineers Local 3, which is the largest construction local in the United States. We have a 4-state jurisdiction. We represent about 40,000 members, and we have about 1,462 apprentices in our various apprenticeship programs. The industries we covered are, operating engineers, which is heavy equipment. So we build roads, bridges. Anything yellow out there you see is probably run by one of our members. We also do crane operators. We also represent surveying and testing inspection on construction sites. And of course, we do a ton of drilling. So we have a really highly skilled workforce. And I know you guys are going to drop in our website in the chat and our internationals website. And if you get on there, there's some really amazing videos on our training site. So we have a training site outside of Sacramento. It's about 1,600 acres. We have over 150 pieces of equipment out there. And we train on everything from cranes to drill rigs, just about everything you need for that kind of construction. On the larger piece of labor, I mean, there's over 500,000 trade union members in the state of California, and we have about 72,000 apprentices that cover everything from, the plumbers and electricians and sheet metal and the whole kind of kit and caboodle. And within that umbrella, my union belongs to the state building trades, and we engage on these issues quite a bit. I'll digress for a minute. I also sit on the Golden Gate Bridge Board of Directors, so I get to see some of this stuff from a policy perspective from that transit agency. And I also am the Democratic Executive Board member from Sonoma County, along with Pat Sabo, to the State Executive Board of the Democratic Party. And I'm the treasurer of the Labor Caucus, which is the largest caucus within the party. So I get to interact. I mean, I don't know as much about geothermal as our august presenters before me, but I do get to dive into the policy aspects of a lot of this stuff. And when folks come to me and we're able to help put our apprentices to work and our journeymen to work, it makes a lot of sense for us to partner, whether, and I've worked on geothermal, I've worked on offshore wind up in Humboldt. We helped craft and sponsor some of the legislation. Our International Union of Operating Engineers in DC, helped develop a lot of the language for the Inflation Reduction Act and the tax incentives for labor standards. Because a big piece of this too is, as we, we still represent, I mean, about 100% of oil and gas industry and nuclear is organized, and those are amazing jobs. So when you get into our apprenticeship program, not only it's not a burden on the taxpayer because it's actually funded through our collective bargaining agreements by the employer, and it's free to get in, and it costs us about $60 million a year to train those 1,500 apprentices. But once you're in, you go through the steps, you train up at our ranch. It takes about 4 or 5 years to get through the program, so you have a highly skilled workforce. And these skills are transferable. So a crane operator at an oil refinery, or a crane operator on a wind project, or a crane operator doing geothermal, those are all transferable skills. And I would also say for drilling too. I mean, whether we're drilling for oil or we're drilling for geothermal, these are highly skilled pieces of equipment that have to be maintained, that have to be operated properly, and we train on all that stuff. And it is a transition, and not in the past. I think traditionally labor has fought kind of some of the changes that we're moving into now, but over the last 5 or 6 years especially, things have really come around in the labor movement and within the building trades on, we realize we can try to fight for our jobs, but we also realize that, there's a bridge to be had there. And the bills that were talked about, I actually had the pleasure of speaking on AB 531 with Assemblyman Rogers' bill, and my coworker spoke on Assemblywoman Pappin's bill. And one of the things that was so key in those bills was the skilled and trained workforce language. And any one of these bills too, we need to have labor protections for folks, so we don't have low road contractors coming in and doing this work, and we don't have that transition. So skilled and trained workforce language is similar to a project labor agreement, where a project is when a project goes forward, you negotiate a labor agreement that covers all the crafts on that project. Skilled and trained workforce language means that the workers on that project, some crafts are 35%, some are 65%. Whatever percentage of those workers have actually graduated from a state certified apprenticeship program, which means they've been they're skilled and trained. And most of the state certified apprenticeship programs are union programs. So it is a way to ensure a very high level of training, and it's a way to ensure labor standards. Now, it's been, I've had the pleasure, I went back last year. There's a group that we've been working with too called the Climate Jobs National Resource Center. And they're this kind of amazing group that kind of came out of the hurricane in New York. But the idea, and they're starting to spread, and I know me and Woody had a great conversation about this, is where, as we do transition, let's embrace the transition, but let's also build those standards in, because these union members that I represent, I mean, it's almost like European style socialism. You have free classrooms, you have a great wage, you have a pension for life, and your pension covers your spouse's life as well. We also have retirement medical, and we also have like a small 401k supplemental retirement program, and we also have healthcare that is great and amazing. And the way the building trade is structured too is we have over 3,000 signatory contractors. So those folks can travel from contractor to contractor to contractor, and it could be any of the 3 contractors that is going to work on Sonoma Clean Power here. But those same workers can work for different companies and not lose their benefits. So we're just doing everything we can to maintain, the standard of living for our membership. But we also know that, climate change is real, and we want to be part of the solution. And I really loved partnering with my friends on offshore wind up in Humboldt, and with this geothermal project here. I live right here in Sonoma County, been up through the geysers multiple times. We actually built the geysers, the operating engineers and the other crafts. And even when the Valley Fire went up in 2015, we went up and rebuilt the geothermal plants that had been burned to the ground. So I can stop there, but I'm just really pleased to be part of the conversation. And like I said, we are a partner to the environmental movement and to any agencies that are looking to move legislation that it's going to help get these things built, because energy is way too expensive, and we need to move into a cleaner future. So with that, I'll hold my comments for anything else if anybody's got any questions. But thank you again.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate all you out there in the workforce making these things happen, getting stuff built. Folks, I hope you are inspired to, once again, I'm going to click through here a bit. Once again, please scan this QR code. Hope you're inspired by our speakers to take action. We always like to have some action for you in our webinars so you can support Assembly Bill 531. Mark is also dropping a link into the chat, whichever way you'd like to access that. And if you could do that, that would be great. Do it today. Do it now. This brings us to our discussion portion of the webinar, where we are pleased to discuss your questions. I'm going to take this off so that we can all see each other now. Come on screen. And I think what I'm going to do is circle back to Neil and start with you, Neil, if I may. And we're in this phase, in this mid-transition from fossil fuels to the new clean energy economy, where electrification is really the buzz. And the electrical load is rapidly increasing from a whole bunch of different electrification sectors. And one of them is the enormously demanding data center and AI and all that stuff. So the question is there an opportunity for high demand data centers to pioneer the use of advanced geothermal to bring down the costs to meet that demand? The question says hyperscalers seem to have the resources to do resources. So is delay, uncertainty the big obstacle? Anyway, the question is about AI centers being able to utilize the technology that you're advancing.
Absolutely, and thank you for that question coming in from your webinar participants. It's massive. I mean, you see the electricity demand that we've had, it's been flat for 20 years. Now we're starting to see it ramp up, and it's ramping up more in jurisdictions that have this data center AI demand, and it is really, really big. And the person who asked it is absolutely correct. I mean, these are highly profitable big hyperscalers, and they are Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, these guys who have the ability to pay more for power and to be able to pass through and have their customers be able to do what they need to do. And so there was an RFI that was put out by Google, Nucor, and Microsoft, who said, we will pay more for this type of energy. Bring those to us. Microsoft Climate Innovation Fund have invested in us. I am talking to all the hyperscalers, all of the NextGen geothermal companies. We've seen some big announcements go through with different partnerships with different NextGen groups. So that is absolutely going to be the key to bring down these costs, because as a next generation geothermal, starting on that highest point of the cost curve, we need to have these groups who can afford to pay more, and we're seeing that happen. So that is coming down the cost curve, and then that is getting us to a point where we can now deploy it more globally after that. So the answer is absolutely yes. Everyone's talking to them, and there's a huge interest because they have these commitments that they put forth, and really geothermal is the answer. It's either geothermal or SMRs. That's what they're both going for, and my vote is on geothermal.
And SMR?
Sorry, small modular reactors, nuclear.
Yeah,
and also bigger nuclear. There've been some of those announcements as well. So really, it's an insatiable demand.
An SMR is one of those problematic ones because there's also the production of hydrogen using steam methane reformation, right? So you got two different SMRs in the acronym world.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, good. Thank you for that. That's greatly appreciated. Let's go back to you, Claudia. So as a public agency, Sonoma Clean Power has a responsibility to ensure the transition to that the transition is equitable. This includes ensuring that the economic and environmental benefits are shared fairly and the costs and risks do not disproportionately burden vulnerable communities. What steps has Sonoma Clean Power taken to ensure equitable access to the benefits of generation geothermal? And maybe if you can, touch on because Sonoma Clean Power is a sponsor of some of the assembly bills. If you could speak to how those bills address that question as well, that would be great.
Okay. Great question. I think I'll start by sort of framing it that all the community engagement that we're doing in the GeoZone ties back to our community engagement strategies as a whole, as an agency, and making sure that we're reaching folks that we haven't reached before, that we're engaging with them, that we're getting them information about our services and our offerings. You know, we know that folks can't start talking about these, conceptual geothermal projects if they don't understand why Sonoma Clean Power is on their electricity bill. And so that's kind of the foundational approach, is just making sure that we're doing our best to engage with our customers and be equitable in our distribution of things like sponsorships and our time and our energy and tabling out in the community, and getting to know different local service providers and organizations who can then, be a trusted messenger to those harder to reach communities. And starting with that, but then, being able to also bring in the GeoZone and create a feedback loop so that they understand what Sonoma Clean Power's role is in this process, and why we're talking about geothermal, and then be able to feel comfortable enough to speak up and be part of the process. So I think that's a big piece of how we're trying to make sure that all voices are included, is just making sure that we're talking to people and that we're bringing them in to the work we do. And then let's see what else. I think also part of the conversation too is kind of coming to terms with the fact that, we locally do rely on sources like natural gas, and that's happening today. And we as a community are not feeling those impacts in the same way that the communities that are living around those natural gas plants are. And so they are holding that burden for us to be able to have power here. And so I think it's also telling that bigger story of, like, the choices that we make here locally do have impacts outside of just our service area. And so what sort of model do we want to set, and what are we willing to take on, so that other communities can also be uplifted and experience the benefits of clean power overall in the state. And then I think from the legislative side, we just have a whole lot of barriers to getting these projects off the ground. So even before we're not even close to putting a shovel in the ground, right? Or even having a developer ready to submit a permit. And so these bills are really that first essential step to getting California ready to even talk about, the equitable distribution of benefits, or how these projects are sited, or what the environmental impacts will be. We're not even ready for those conversations yet because of these really big barriers that we're seeing in law and regulation.
Yeah, and I know that some of those laws and regulations were laid down 50 years ago in the 1970s, and so they are because the new technologies, those policies, I think, have not necessarily kept up with the changes. So I think there probably is some need for sort of revision, that kind of thing. A little bit of a follow-up. I know you've done a lot of work in reaching out to indigenous communities, and conventional geothermal has been limited to locations where there's hot rock near the surface. Those have tended to be sacred sites, water magically emerging from the ground. So the model that you talk about is a model that can avoid needing to or wanting to go to those kinds of locations, right? It's a model that, again, that Neil has talked about, we're all talking about, that these next gen systems can go pretty much anywhere, correct? But tell us a little bit about the interaction with the indigenous communities.
Yeah, I think so. We've prioritized, our efforts to build relationships with local tribal governments and hold formal consultations and do our homework to make sure that we are showing up as a true partner for our local tribes. And when it comes to energy development and the opportunity for energy independence and energy sovereignty for tribes, I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think a lot of state agencies are talking about this too, of for so long, tribes have not been part of the conversation. And so for our geozone effort, it starts with just building that relationship and having trust, and then learning from them. What are their priorities? What is their vision of the future for their nation? Can we support, but not assuming that they want our help or need our help in that. But I think just being a good partner, being respectful, inviting them to be part of the conversation, and also empowering them within their own operations or whatever to think about what they might like to see.
Okay, thank you. Got it.
Yeah.
That's fine. Appreciate that. And so let's go to you, Chris. And so how is it going? The question is, how's it going? Like, so in terms of in terms of having developers, you know, do PLAs and to do high road employment, skilled and trained. Sort of a combo question. So how's that going? What is OEE3 doing? Operating engineers or your fellow unions doing to ensure that those jobs are comparable in stability and wages to the ones in that you said are great jobs in
Yeah,
nuclear or
yeah.
oil and
No,
gas, right? And sort of a combo question. I question also about the training that's required, because my understanding is that there's a nearly one-to-one relationship of the skills used in oil and gas in particular to
yeah.
geothermal, right? So can you speak to that a little bit as well?
Yeah, I would say, how's it going? I mean, we were co-sponsors of both these bills because we really, AB 527 and 31, and testified at all of them, because that is, I mean, this is like the definition of a partnership between, a public agency and private equity and labor standards. And like you said, these skills are completely transferable. And if we're going to be part of the solution for the next generation of energy, we absolutely, because these are new industries, it's so hard to organize. I mean, federal law it makes it very difficult for organized labor to bring folks. They 70% of people approve of unions, but we have less than 11% union density because of just such an anti union environment in DC. So anything, and when you have a new industry, you have to organize. These are old industries that have been around for hundreds of years, and we've had them organized for so long, and they provide amazing, like, great benefits and good wages, and allow folks to send their kids to college. But if we lose the next generation of energy to non-union or out-of-state contractors that don't use local hire, that don't use a skilled and trained workforce, that don't participate in the actual training of the workers, because a big key to this is the apprenticeship program is what we lose members every year. We have, our folks can retire as early as 55, so we're continually bringing new apprentices in, and we also have the ability to expand or contract our apprenticeship program depending on how much, because we're always looking at what are the hours going to be like, and the more stuff in the pipeline, with so depressed about large repeals of the Inflation Reduction Act stuff, but all that stuff. Our union was growing by 10,000 members a month under Biden at the end because of the 2 trillion in infrastructure, and then the many hundreds and hundreds of billions in the CHIPS Act and the IRA, and now we're starting to see all that dry up. So I know maybe that was a convoluted answer, but we really have to partner with these folks to have these labor standards in these projects. Otherwise, we're going to lose the industry to non-union, low road contractors that have a lot more fatalities on the job, aren't properly trained, and it's so key for labor to be able to stay strong to kind of develop these industries as they grow and as they come into being.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, and convoluted can be okay as long as it helps round out the
Yeah.
answer. Yeah, let's loop back to Neil. Neil, I've got I think a simple yes or no question for you at the start, but then so another combo type question. So the first is I've gotten a question in actually yesterday and again today. Is what you do, does it count as deep, hot, dry rock technology? That's the term that's being used, deep, hot, dry rock drilling. And then the sort of broader question I'd like you to touch on is, because it's a smaller footprint, like the size of maybe an electrical substation, right? A smaller footprint can be closer to the load. Could Evers systems be used as an anchor baseload in a clean microgrid? From where I sit, I can't see why not, so I'm looking forward to hearing your answer. But first, that question about does it count as dealing?
I would say that there's so many different words and acronyms and things being tossed around. Another one is super hot rock that you may hear. So there are a lot of different acronyms that are thrown around. Are we drilling deep? Yes. Are we drilling as deep as like 4.5 kilometers deep? We want to drill the world's deepest wells. So yes, I would say that characterizes deep. Hot, the deeper you get, the hotter it is. Could it be characterized as deep hot rock? Yes, I would say yes. Some of that super hot rock, typically they try and do an EGS type of application at the end of it. They'll be looking at fracking some of those to get to the connectivity. We just build a radiator, so that would be a differentiator between those two. So a closed loop versus an EGS project. But all of them are looking for hot rock. I mean, the hotter the resource, the better. Now, if we can drill deeper, which we're trying to kind of move forward, that really unlocks a lot more of the space. We don't need to have those kind of Goldilocks just right, really hot temperature gradients, and that's what we're actively looking to do. Your question on can we go where the demand is? The answer is absolutely yes. But a key piece of that question is size. It doesn't make sense to go and do this for a very small installation. We are looking, especially early on, where you want to come down that cost curve and drill the same geology over and over again. We're looking at kind of 200 megawatt size chunks is what we're optimally looking for now. As we come down that cost curve, that number is going to get smaller, and we're looking at remote indigenous communities in Canada, for example, or other places that have a smaller demand, but they could be a microgrid where they could be self-sufficient, where they have transmission line, different cost pieces. But right now, the minimum size that we're looking at for one installation is the 200 megawatts, and you're right, it can go anywhere. There's a couple of different ways. Typically, we would be using a binary cycle. So someone asked that question as well. So it would be an organic Rankine cycle unit. So there'd be two separate kind of loops. One of them would be powering that organic Rankine cycle unit. Those are typically aerial cooled, which means they use much less or no water. You can use cooling towers, which will make your footprint smaller, but then you're using more water. There's just a lot of permutations around that. So, but the short answer is that yes, Woody, we can go anywhere with microgrids, but scale really becomes a critical part of that question.
Thank you for that. Little follow-up question about the deep hot rock. Are there any projects that you're aware of in California that would fit that definition, or is ever doing anything in California?
We're doing stuff in California for sure. I mean, one of the questions was, what have we done with our GeoZone initiative? We've evaluated, we've taken geologic samples, we've looked at all of Mendocino and Sonoma counties, and we're continuing to look at that. You can imagine that some of that real estate is very expensive in and around there in the Napa Valley. So that adds some challenging bits. Discussions with tribal. It could be a really wonderful solution around that. So right now, that is where we're at. We're at a kind of a desktop and plus evaluation for our projects in California. And I'm not aware of any super hot rock that's happening in California right now. Now there was a BLM land sale just yesterday, which is the Bureau of Land Management. They had a geothermal lease, which was the first one that they've had since 2017 in California, and it brought it was very much focused in and around the Salton Sea in Southern California, but it brought in a lot of interest. Some of the highest price was like $270 an acre. Brought in, I think, $2.7 million in bonus payments, and a really well attended, and I think it bodes well for future BLM, Bureau of Land Management, land sales, federal land to go towards geothermal development, but very much focused in the Southern California and Salton Sea area for this last land sale.
Okay, thank you very much. Oops, I muted myself unintentionally. Back to you, Claudia. So the question is from Brett around info sharing, technology sharing, I guess. Question around how, first of all, are there other community choice agencies around the state, to your knowledge, that are exploring NextGen geothermal, and or, are you doing anything proactively to sort of share what you're doing at Sonoma Clean Power with other CCAs? And, other CCAs and other, say, load serving entities of any stripe, municipal utilities, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not aware of any other CCAs or utilities that are sort of doing what we're doing as far as really trying to lay out the welcome mat for geothermal development within our region. I know there's an incredible interest in next generation geothermal production and being able to have some power purchase agreements with generating facilities like that in the future. I know MCE just announced a really big partnership with Calpine for expanding the conventional geothermal power that they're producing at the Geysers. But as far as NextGen geothermal, I'm not aware of any who are sort of doing something similar to the GeoZone at this time. I think there's interest. And as far as sort of getting the word out and sharing lessons learned, for sure, within Cal CCA, which is our trade association for all community choice aggregators. Sonoma Clean Power is definitely sharing our lessons learned, trying to share, realistically, this is what the landscape looks like, and this is why we're having such a challenge getting projects built here. And so definitely, leaning on some of our other sister agencies to also be talking within their communities and talking within their teams and talking with their lawmakers to really kind of promote the value of next generation geothermal and the potential that we have here.
Well, thank you. Okay, Chris, let's go back to you. We've got some further questions about the training sort of another combo question of seems to be some confusion about how much it takes, up to 4 or 5 years. I've heard, that it can just be a couple of days of training. So what is it, and can that happen sort of while an oil and gas worker is still on the job? Can they be doing that, sort of in a transitional way? Anything to say
Um,
to that?
yeah, when I talk about training, it's like the skilled and trained workforce language is language that's key to a lot of the bills that we're running around clean energy, and not just this bill, but offshore wind, all these other things. But that's language that also applies to highway construction and you know uh, capping of oil wells that they're looking at. And what it means is that they've been through a apprenticeship program, and generally speaking, not saying that that specific job duty, drilling, is going to take 4 or 5 years to train on, but they've had multiple years of training. And a lot of these folks they can run an oil well, or they can, run a drill rig, and maybe that's what they specialize in. But they also have their, commercial driver's license, so they can actually drive it. They're Class A. And then one of the beautiful things about the apprenticeship program, the training, is that say there's we finish this drilling and whatnot. Our folks are also training on other pieces of equipment like cranes or excavators, and the training is all free. So there's the initial apprenticeship program that, and there's drill focus, there's crane focus, there's different pathways within our programs. But then once you're part of the union, you can go and train either in Texas at our national training center, or in Local 3's training center out of Sacramento, on any piece of equipment you want. So and we also do, we're systems engineers too. So we represent, the International Union represents the stationary engineers. So like all the hospital systems like Kaiser are represented by our sister local. So they're systems engineers, and they run all sorts of systems, whether it could be geothermal, it could be, like that whole kind of thing. But that's what I really try to say, is that it is ongoing training for the rest of your career. And as technology changes, we change with the technology. And so we're like, our surveying, and I'll jump around a little bit, but they'll be surveying on these projects. So we represent surveyors, and before they had to, they had to know trigonometry. They all still have to know trig, and how they traditionally did it way back with George Washington. But now we're training on surveying with drones, and full CAD systems, and all the GPS related stuff, and the new technology. So that being said, that's why we have the highest skilled workforce in the world. Is the standards within California's apprenticeship system is the best, and our folks do. It's amazing what they can do, and again, all these skills are transferable. And and going back to skilled and trained language, that does mean, again, that folks have to have to work on these jobs. They have to have graduated from a state certified apprenticeship program, and for the most part, those are only union programs that are recognized. There's some other ones within the construction industry, but so I saw a question about local hire. So those programs are within Sonoma County, the plumbers union. I'm half a mile away from their training facility. The electricians have a training facility. And so when these projects are done on a local level, those folks are going to be local people that have graduated from those programs going to work on these projects. And again, great jobs, pensions, healthcare, the ability to buy a home in Sonoma County or Lake County or Mendocino County. Like, these are real middle-class jobs, not, a Starbucks job or something like that. So.
Right. Gotcha. All right, back to you, Neil. And another combo question. What's the lifetime expectancy for one of your systems? If you have, I mean, no, it's a very new company, 2017 founded, I think, something like that.
Yep.
Is that
Yep.
correct?
Yep. That's correct.
And so what's the expectancy once you've got a system up and running? And then also, is Ever's technology considered binary? And the last part of the three-part question is, can it be used? And I think I know the answer to some of these, but I'll ask them anyway. Could Everloop system be used for the high energy consuming seawater desalination?
Yes, so I'll start with the first question, which is predictability, and it is the most predictable type of geothermal because we build the underground heat exchanger. It is simply a physics equation. So we had our Everlight facility, which was in one of those images, which was drilled in Alberta, drilled 2.5 kilometers apart, 2.5 kilometers down. It was operational for 5 years, and we predicted within 0.2% of the output of what we had continually for 5 years. So it's simply a physics equation. So I can tell you in year 38 what the output is going to be, in year 56 what the output. So it does start to decline after about 30 years. You start to have some constructive interference between the wellbores, depending on how far apart you place them. And the very first amount of energy you get out of the system is massive. It's kind of that virgin rock temperature. You're going to get a lot. We don't model to that. We model out, and it's simply a physics equation. So it's a very long lifetime. You're getting meaningful amounts of energy 100 years out. So it's really an intergenerational energy supply.
Intergenerational. I think that answers the question. That was my sort of speculation that really the resource is on human timescales inexhaustible. So
It's crazy.
if you put in a system to generate the electricity, over time you may need to refurbish or redrill or something, upgrade, maintain the system. But with that, theoretically, these things could last for
Yeah.
thousands of years.
Absolutely, absolutely. The resource
So the other parts were about
yeah. So seawater desalination, absolutely. Huge amount of energy needed for those, and we're looking for those in many jurisdictions, whether it be in Chile or in the Middle East. I mean, that's a massive energy supply, and those just need energy. And so, yes, desalination is a strong use case for us. And the other one was, is it a binary cycle? I think I answered that earlier, and that it pairs with a binary system, an organic Rankine style system. And so I think that was the question they're asking. I mean, there's different types of geothermal. There's flash plants and many different types, but we are operating in the organic Rankine cycle binary system that we'd be producing. Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, Claudia, I'm hoping you can say a little bit about Sonoma Clean Powers and perhaps any load serving entities, particularly, and I think you touched on this a little bit, but can you expand a little bit more about why is it that something like NextGen Geothermal is helpful to Sonoma Clean Power's power mix, to your power mix, how it fits into the load. And I'll just say one thing because I love saying this word. It's part of the answer. Maybe you have more to say, which is the Dunkelflaute, right? The German word for that period of time in the winter where there's long stretches, weeks on end, and there's no sun and there's no wind, and the batteries become exhausted. What do you do if you want to have a clean system, right? So that's part of the answer, right? You got to address that. But other aspects about the sort of the load mix and the load shape that I know Sonoma Clean Power cares so much about. Can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah. So from a local provider perspective, right, our goal is to be able to eventually provide 100% renewable, carbon-free electricity at every hour of the day. And right now, the way that sort of our industry or our sector tracks greenhouse gas emissions and our sort of portfolio mix is sort of on an annual basis, or what is the total mix that we have, and are we meeting capacity? Are we meeting the demand with all these different sources? But that doesn't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily mean that at every moment of the day we are using renewable energy. So right now our default power mix is 90% renewable and carbon free, but 10% of that time we're using system power, which is primarily natural gas at this time. So if we want to, and there's a lot of different programs out there that claim to be 100% renewable, right? And that's because they are either they're using RECs or they're, you know, sort of offsetting the dirty power that they're, or the, sorry, not dirty power, the non-renewable energies that they're using during the day by supplying more, by purchasing more renewable energy to sort of offset that. But in this, you know, vision that we have of a truly renewable energy future, we need sources that can provide power at all times of the day. Some of you may be familiar with like time of use rates, right? And that's sort of this movement that the state has been trying to get consumers to understand that it's not just how much energy you use, it's when you're using it. And so we have all this ample solar power in the middle of the day, right? Sort of between those hours of 11 and 3. But the demand for electricity really ramps up around like 4 to 9, right? And that's when a lot of folks are coming home. We're turning on our appliances. And so the ability for current renewable energy sources to meet that demand and ramp up in the way that natural gas has that flexibility to do, we need sources that are more constant, more reliable, and yeah, not as impacted by.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. And I'm looking at the clock, so we're coming down to our last moments. I think maybe we have a time for a lightning round from each of you. Really just a sentence or two about, you know, anything that wasn't covered in the way that we didn't discuss that you think is important, or just your sense of what the prospects are. Chris, I'll start with you. Real quick.
Yeah, sure. You know, sometimes you're in your own world and you don't always realize what people don't know. But I wanted to go back on the apprenticeship program. So, say journeyman wage is $70 an hour. The apprentices are getting paid while they learn. So they start usually at 50%. So they're generally making, you know, 30 or more dollars an hour when they start, and then that process goes over 4 years, and they eventually hit that high scale. I would say if folks are interested. OE3.org. There's a link to our apprenticeship program. Then there's the international IUOE.org also has some great training links. We're always looking for new members, and especially in this industry. So thank you.
Thanks. Real quick. Okay, Neil, real quick.
When you look at geothermal energy, it ticks all the boxes, and it is so exciting, and we are moving really quickly in this space. It needs to be secure. You need to have energy autonomy. It needs to be affordable. You need to have the justice, the stakeholders. One of the questions was, are we planning on using with the GeoZone local labor? And the answer is yes. I mean, that's written into the contract that we signed with SCP. So I think that was asked a few times and wasn't covered. So the answer is we want to do right, and we're excited about it, and we think that we have a real solution that not only California can use for themselves, but everywhere on the planet can have a secure energy source that they can now have that equity happen. And so we're really excited about it, and that's what gets me up every day. So thank you so much for having us.
Great. Thanks so much, Neil. And Claudia, I think I'm gonna have to, what you just said before was your last word, okay? So I need to ask folks to, once again, we have our call to action. So if you haven't already, please do click on this QR code or click on the link in the chat, and we can you can take your action and tell your legislators support Assembly Bill 531. And I just want to let folks know about our next webinar coming up on Thursday, September 18th, collaborating across sectors to accelerate electric school bus adoption for reliable energy. It is not just load, it is a grid resource. School buses, those basically rolling power plants, can provide electricity to the grid when needed. Super important. That's it for today. My name is Woody Hastings. That's my contact info. Sorry we didn't get to all your questions. We did try to get to as many as we could, but follow up with me and we can get your questions answered soon. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate you being here. And that is the conclusion of our webinar. Have a great day.